Hi, I'm Vince Faust from Life and Spirit Online, and with me is Senator Vincent Hughes, the originator and starter of Breaking the Silence on mental health.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
Wow, I think the first conference was in 1998. I believe that's when it was. And it's clearly an issue, clearly a need, and it's a vehicle to really deal with probably the first and most important issue around dealing with mental illness, which is breaking down that stigma, breaking the silence, so that folks can access the services that are available to them.
So, well, why did you get started? I mean, this is something that I champion because I do health and fitness, but why did you pick something out of all the other things you could have picked?
We this stuff comes to us.
Hmm.
This issue presented itself in our office, and one of the things we do is we don't shy away from the hard issues because this is a very difficult issue.
Difficult.
And kind of because not a lot of folk want to talk about or deal with mental health, mental wellness. So we just said, all right, we got to deal with it. And it presents itself on a regular basis. We have a very active office, so we see a lot of folks who are struggling beyond what maybe their primary issue may be. Their primary issue may be a housing issue. Their primary issue may be an unemployment issue or something along that line. But then when you reach deeper, you usually see something else going on. And so we wanted to create number one, for our office, we needed to access all those. Who are people who are dealing with mental health issues? So we wanted to get connected with all the folks so we could make sure we knew the network. But number two, it was clear that there's a stigma, huge stigma, and we needed to figure a way to break that barrier, break that stigma down. This is it.
Now, I know that they've been politicizing a lot of things that happen with mental health. The shooting in Fort Dix, the school shootings, and then all of a sudden mental health comes into focus. And then they say, well, we need to do more. But I don't see them doing more. I see them talking about it. I see them saying, well, this is something we have to do because it's affecting our community. And every time something like that happens, they're up in arms. But then 2 weeks later, it fizzles.
Well, the opposite side of that viewpoint is, in fact, it's a lot more that's being done. But it's not, you don't discuss it as we're dealing with mental illness. There's two reasons why people weren't accessing care and accessing treatment. Three, basically. One is the stigma. One is the knowledge of the issue, just basically understanding. And the third is insurance coverage, health care coverage, okay? With the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, or other people call it Obamacare, we are dealing with that third big wheel, that third big issue, which is insurance coverage. Lack of insurance usually is a huge barrier in terms of not just on getting care and treatment on mental health services, but all kinds of other health care problems. Now that we've got the Affordable Care Act in place and we're slowly knocking down the walls of the financial barriers, we will be doing that with mental wellness and mental health care. And so folks will be able to access mental health care services. There'll be a greater focus on making those services preventive as opposed to reactive services, which means getting people into treatment and a diagnosis early on instead of reactive care. Reactive care is really when it gets very far advanced and you have to provide drugs and psychiatric treatment to deal with it. So there is a lot that has gone on. So while the insurance issue is being confronted and we're slowly getting people enrolled, we still got to deal with the stigma issue and the education issue, and that's what Breaking the Silence is all about.
Now, we're going to get back to that part too, but one of the things that disturbed me was that this morning we're talking about consolidating of services where you have large companies that come in and take over, let's say, mental health facilities, and you got a company that handles like 40% of the country's mental health. How is that going to affect it? A lot of times when things get really big with health issues, it's not a good outcome.
It really is important for regular folks to really have an increased knowledge of their own health care services, especially in mental health care. It's going to be very difficult to stop or prevent the oversized corporations from coming in every aspect of our life. I mean, there's no longer, as you would know, Vince, there's no longer the neighborhood drugstore.
Right.
Okay, it's the Rite Aid, it's the CVS, it's the Walgreens. Those are the big players now. No longer the neighborhood drugstore. The neighborhood restaurant is becoming a thing of the past with this proliferation of chain restaurants of all kinds and all kinds of qualities. All right, and those are owned by very large corporations, and sometimes very large corporations will own more than one fast food chain. Okay, so it's hard to prevent against that. What we have to do is be an educated consumer. All right, it's very important that we're educated and knowledgeable about the services that are provided, should be provided, and that we need to access. And again, that's one of the things that Breaking the Silence is all about, trying to make sure that we have educated consumers, people who understand the system, get a clear understanding of how the system is supposed to work, what the good things are, what the bad things are, and are proactive about getting those services. Once folks are better educated and more knowledgeable, they can then deal with the broad issue of the fact that, while we got this major corporation coming in and kind of taking over everything, education is huge and it's fundamental.
So we're going to start at a younger age, educating our kids about mental health.
Oh, sure.
Even elementary school.
Sure. I mean, look, what we see operating around, and you'll see as some of the folks talk to us about from the various different workshops, from the panel discussions, is we are the level of stress that exists in our community is intensifying, and it's intensifying at all age ranges, from very young kids to seniors, and it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. You have to include the Alzheimer's conversation in this conversation. We are a growing population. Yeah. You and I are getting old, man.
Don't say that.
We don't look it. We don't look
No,
it, right?
definitely
Okay,
don't.
all right. But we're getting old, okay? And we've got to create a system of services that identifies that, connects with that, and then trains up the people who need to be trained up to provide the services for folks as they go through this transformation. And especially with young people, one of the things that we have to do is we have to educate our service providers, our teachers, in our schools, to be conscious of what young people are dealing with. You cannot escape this financial disparity, the fact that for the last 10 or 20 years, the middle income folks have been losing ground financially. Right. For not just one decade, but over 2 decades now. And we can't lose sight of what the stress level that comes as a result of that. The cost of things are going up, but the income is not going up to match. In fact, the income is going the other way. So people are downsizing their homes. More people are living in households. Folks are renting out bedrooms in their houses to strangers that they don't know. So the level of stress that comes as a result of that manifests itself to everybody in that house. So we got to educate folks about that. We got to make sure that there's services available for folks. In addition, we got to deal with one of the things that I talked about is we've got to help each other in these battles that we're fighting. I may have a mental health struggle or policy issue that I'm working on, but someone over here may have a raise the minimum wage conversation that they're working on. Or someone over here may have a conversation about improving the education system. We cannot isolate ourselves because all of these 3 things are totally interconnected, and each one has an impact on the other. So we can't silo and just focus on ours. We've got to work on everyone else's and work with them so that they can help us deal with what it is that we have to deal with. Because all of this is interconnected, and all of this in some way manifests itself into our mental health system, into the care and the level of health we have from a mental perspective.
Now, you're one senator. Should we be talking to the other people that represent us to get on the bandwagon with this, have discussions about it? Not saying that we're going to solve the problem in a couple of years or a couple of bills, but should we be contacting state and local and federal people?
I think that, look what's happened in the last couple of years. In the last couple of months, the situation in Fort Hood, okay, just a few days ago. The woman who in Florida who drove her car into the ocean with her kids in the back of the
Right.
car with the intention of killing himself. She was a domestic violence survivor. Okay, the woman in Washington D.C. who tried to ram the White House and was killed with her child sitting in the back seat of the car. All of these issues are I think clear indicators that this stuff is percolating up and making itself present in a lot of different forms and a lot of different situations. I think it's incumbent upon all elected officials at all levels, city, state, federal, to get engaged and get involved in how we deal with this. But I also think it's incumbent that we learn more about it so that you and I can identify, or the average person can identify someone who's walking down the street and maybe acting out a little bit, and that, maybe it's not I got to call the police right away, but maybe it's I need to find a mental health worker who might be able to successfully intervene with this person and get them to stop. And that has, from a cultural perspective, that has a huge impact. It's African, and people deal with this stuff differently.
Most definitely.
You see an African-American male who's not feeling too good and acting out a little bit. There's a tendency, the first person to call, that's got to call the police, okay? You see a white male who's a little bit off his rocker and not functioning quite well and, acting a little bit outside the norm. The first tendency is to call a healthcare professional to come in and intercede in that fashion. Now, both individuals got the same issue, but because there's a cultural insensitivity, all right, they're not dealt with in the same fashion. So the broader education is hugely important. By those of us who are not even suffering or have a problem,
Right.
the ability to identify and see when someone is suffering from something, we all need to be educated and trained on.
We're one village. If
Yes,
we don't take
absolutely.
care of each part of it,
Absolutely.
it's going to fall.
It's going to fall apart. Absolutely.
We can't have that.
It's unacceptable.
Vince, thanks for coming over.
Thank you, man.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for being
And that
here,
was
man.
great. Oh,
Thank you.
anytime. You can call me,
All
I'm
right.
here.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good, man. Thank you.
Thanks.